afternoon. High summer in Australia. Wow. What a beautiful spot I ended up this week. And I'm in Warburton. It's in Victoria, outside of Melbourne. And I'm on a Christian and alternative, inclusive retreat center. And it's called Sancta Sophia. And my hosts are Kathleen. So welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you.
And Kathleen is a Dominican sister, am I right? Or
that's correct, Richard. Yeah. Yes.
For really all your life, right?
Yes, since the age of 18.
So then I know we've just celebrated the 16th anniversary here. So you've been at this location for
16 years.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. And a lot of work in Australia. You've been doing even before.
Yes, I've been a teacher in teaching primary school children, being a principal of schools, and deputy and religious education coordinator.
Right.
And as a co-founder of this community, this is my best job yet.
Oh, wow. So let's just find this community, how it goes here, and we'll just find out who else is here. And welcome to Ken.
Thank you, Richard.
Ken is in the Carmelite order, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And
we're an international community, men and women, founded in the Middle Ages on Mount Carmel in Palestine as hermits, and we became then what we call mendicant friars, brothers, and we became involved in education, universities, parishes, spirituality centres, which we still do.
So this is actually a Carmelite
house
unit, right? The house here is belonging to your order.
Yes. The house is really called the Carmelite House of Prayer. And Kathleen and myself have been here 16 years now, and we called this community Sancta Sophia, which means holy wisdom. So holy wisdom, of course, is Jesus' holy wisdom, of course, but it also refers to the holy wisdom present in all the great traditions of the world.
I noticed that the great traditions are all honored here. And,
yes.
And so then these truths must be self-evident because nobody's the owner of the light.
Well, we are in what we call dialogue. So the idea is that we are learning to listen to one another. So we run programs here of different presenters, Buddhist presenters, Hindu presenters, Christian presenters, and very interested in to listen, into dialogue. And dialogue, of course, is also about change. So as we listen, hopefully we change. We hope the other person's also changing too. So it's a part of that ongoing growth and development as a human person.
So basically, that's kind of like a belief of mine: is that dialogue is the foundation of discovery. And so then here we are talking, and maybe we'll discover something. But we're listening to each other. I've been listening to you, and over this week, and was such a pleasure to meet some of the people that you serve, on that anniversary dinner, because I guess you were just on vacation, so that we weren't really in full swing when we got here.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, so it's we have here for our one of our symbols is an open door, and another symbol is shared table. And with the open door, we hope that we can welcome everyone with the warmth of Jesus, actually. And that we show this welcome by sharing our food, our insight, I suppose most of all, our hospitality with those who come. And of course, we're enriched by what we hear, what other people have to say, and hopefully that we're all in a process of transformation.
This morning in meditation, actually it was you Kathleen, that read a passage, and and it was Jesus's words that said, we have to, perhaps it's best to move away from the comings and goings, and what do you call it? Repair to a quiet space, and so that we can know something more true. And in that case, the people found him out, and they ran there first, so he didn't get to the private space. But a lot of times that's what meditation is. It's kind of a separation from society and from community, and trying to see what is here even without the community. And I think there's a great confusion that people think that that's the way to live a life, is separate or isolated or disengaged. And that's why I find your philosophy so honorable, that you're actually engaging in having hospitality and open door and open policy, and trying to actually make spirituality practical in the world. And somehow we have to take it out in the world and try it out, and then maybe go back to our meditation room and then take it out again and see how much of it sticks.
Well, it's the real test, isn't it, of meditation, is the integration into daily life. It's all very fine to meditate and be by yourself, but we have to interact with our brothers and sisters, and that is the big test.
Yeah. What good is it if it doesn't work in the world? If it just works in your private space, and you can be some kind of a hermit. But is that what we're here for, is to be a hermit? Otherwise, we would have been each one like the little prince on his own planet, right?
No, I think Jesus came to really teach us what community is. When I was in India and went to Big Griffiths Ashram, and I arrived at the gate and was welcomed by the monks there, I thought, yes, this is what Jesus came to show us, the way of community. And so that's what Father Ken and myself, we're trying to all the time be, to build authentic community.
Just as I was saying to Kathleen, that we find the world is, people are judging the world to be troubled, and it moves so fast, and we don't know what to do with it. We don't know what to make of it, right? And then we don't even know if old teachings are really relevant anymore. And it takes someone to stand up and show the relevance, and really show that the community can work in this day and age, and is really needed.
That's true. And I think, as Kathleen said, Jesus really came to reform the community of Israel. So he brought back into the community all those people who were pushed out of the community, the sick. The people are dispossessed for their different ideas, the poor particularly, who are in trouble. And he was there in a land which really was under siege. The Romans were occupying the country, and a very tense situation, like in many places around the world. And the poor particularly need to have a sense that they somehow belong and are connected. So the Carmelites, we see our mission as really being forming a local community, but also forming the bigger community. So it means that the people then can find a place for themselves. Also, I think Christianity is about freedom. So how can I become freer? Because Jesus says, well, what it's all about basically is love of God and love of neighbour. That's the commandment. And they're both one, really.
Right.
You can't love God without loving neighbour, and you won't love your neighbour without loving God.
Yeah, you won't love the neighbor without loving God, but we think that we can love God without loving our neighbor, because a lot of those neighbors aren't all that nice. We think.
Well, that's the test, isn't it?
That's the test,
Test, yes.
And so much of this will work inside the Christian community, let's say. Okay, we're working with other Christians, and then they agree with our basic tenets. But a lot of Christians for centuries actually have been missionaries and gone to the pagans, let's say, the tribes, the original peoples of all continents, and it really didn't work out that well for them.
Well, it was about freedom, I think, trying to bring people into freedom. And from the point of view, I suppose, of the Christian communities, they saw that they were free, they felt free. And oftentimes they felt people in other communities were not free, in fact, but very much under superstition, under the fear of anxiety and of the world in which they lived. Oftentimes they were not free, in fact. And it's through Christianity they found the freedom.
I'm going to be a little bit contentious in saying that, like, this world is loaded with anxiety, you know, Christian and non-Christian, and I don't know if it's really worked. I mean, we're so fearful, and then we're contentious with so many people that we're fearful that they might get back at us, right? I mean, and then we're saying Muslims are terrorists or something like that, and these people are so-and-so, and this ones are causing that war, or the Africans are doing terrible things. Well, just look at Bosnia and the Serbians just a few years ago, you know, in our life. I mean, I think there was Christendom in those countries, and still, is it working?
Well, for some it is, some it's not. That's always the problem. Any community, no matter what you might call it, religious or secular, we all have those same difficulties. So it's about the whole issue of becoming free, and that's a process, of course. Yeah. That's where meditation is very helpful.
The beautiful things you're saying, you know, the beautiful things you're saying is that in dialogue you can listen to each other, and things will change in dialogue.
Yes.
And so then there's hope that these old truths will even get sharper.
Yes. Well, this is as Ken was just beginning to say about meditation. So we have to, first of all, learn to listen. Well, we listen to what ourselves, and we're trying to listen to what our inner voice, what the divine, what God is saying to us. And we have to listen to our own feelings. We have to listen to our negativities. And all of this is part of meditation. As we let go, as we allow these things to bubble up and to let go of them, we then are becoming freer.
Allowing things to bubble up, right? Because certain people have an image, and they're projecting an image that doesn't feel all that authentic, but they're thinking it's right. So therefore, for them, it's very hard to let things bubble up, because then they'll say, oh, no, I'm not that way. I can't let that. And so then somehow they dodge it, right? And then can just a normal person be a good meditator, or does you have to be very humble?
Well, I think humility is the fruit of meditation, actually, because humility is really about self-knowledge, about the truth, saying what is true about myself and about others. That's what true humility means. So it's about humus, about the ground, being feet on the ground, basically, is what humility means. So it means then that I have to know more about myself. If I don't know who I am, I'll project that out then onto the other. And the other then becomes the enemy, because I'm really rejecting in myself. I put it out that I reject that person, because I'm really rejecting what's in myself. Quite a common psychological experience. And that's true in the spiritual sphere, of course. But we always come back to the standard. What is the standard? The standard is love of God and love of neighbour. And self-knowledge is a very important aspect of that, and also discernment is a very important aspect of that as well.
And then we've got, one of the things we have to do is actually to be able to accept what's and all, and to love who we are. Because if we can't really love ourselves, well, it's very difficult to love anyone else. And I think I've received a lot of help actually from the Buddhist tradition with loving kindness meditation. And while loving kindness meditation, we have the content in our Christian tradition. Jesus says, love your neighbour as yourself. But I have found that in the Buddhist tradition, we're given very specific meditations for trying to show this love to oneself. So I'm grateful for that tradition, from what I've heard.
Again, I'm thinking that our self-image is kind of destructive and doesn't allow us to really I can think of lots of times, even when I kind of broke through and said I should kind of serve the other. I wasn't included in that. I wasn't loving myself. I was projecting that this is a perfect entity here that's moving out there to help all those, I don't know what, wherever I could, right? So then it's very hard to include yourself unless you start from some kind. Again, I say it's a humility, know yourself. Of course, we don't know ourselves, but maybe that has something to do with the. Many Christians say that the way to start to be a Christian is to admit you're a sinner, and so then that's kind of like admit that you really don't know. Well, you don't even have to say you're a sinner, but you have to, in a way, say that I don't know who I am, and from that I can know who I am because I can investigate it. But if I say no, I know who I am. Then how are you going to ever even really look at it?
And of course, one of the important aspects of what we're on about at Sancta Sophia is the search for holy wisdom, is this knowing is love, and that love will break down the barriers. Love will help us to understand who we are. And we look on that the highest wisdom is love, and that Jesus is the wisdom of God, and that he does teach us how to love. And then we show this in our everyday life by the service that we show to one another.
I think also, Richard, in regard to the sense of who am I, that's where the great traditions are very helpful, because over many, many centuries and reflection on who we are as person, we begin to see the light and the dark, as it were. And also then we need to have good teachers, people who have walked the path themselves, who can notice the footfalls, the difficulties of the path, and be able to share that. So like in the Christian tradition, we have what we call the spiritual direction. So you'll go along to someone to help you along the way, and that person would share with you then the journey, and you would share the journey, your journey with them. And through that dialogue that goes together, then we begin to recognise what actually is going on for me.
Is that generally a priest in the Christian tradition, or is that other levels of mentor? Well,
generally it has been in the past, but in recent years, a lot of lay people now are studying this whole area of spiritual direction. And you can go and do a degree in spiritual direction. And people find that extremely helpful, because it isn't easy to understand yourself, because we always have the blind spot. So someone else can easily spot it, as it were, and can help you to
somehow
see
the
it.
trick is in the gentleness of the showing. If you show in a very gentle way and say you can look here, or somehow just expose something without trying to force it down someone's throat or saying you're wrong.
In the dialogue, that's what happens. In fact, the person begins to recognise that and begins to say, "Oh yes, that's what it's really all about. I thought it was this, but no, it's not that after all, is it?" In other words, I'm more interested in myself at the moment rather than other people. In other words, I'm very self-centered, perhaps. All the time I thought I wasn't. I thought I was very other-centered, but my behaviour would tend to indicate that I'm perhaps not as other-centered as I really am.
What do you think is at the root of self-centeredness? I mean, is that just natural for humans, or is there something kind of at the root of it?
Well, I think oftentimes it's a part of our conditioning through childhood. Perhaps lack of love, lack of care, lack of others being concerned for us. And so it makes us become very sensitive to ourselves, to our own anxieties, to our fears, hurts, and so on.
So we start to feel very needy, like we need this, we need that, we need this, and so then we think of ourselves first.
Yes. But it does seem to be, I think, and all the great traditions would suggest that there seems to be what would we call it? We called it in the Christian tradition original sin, but It's like a tendency to become more self-centered. Perhaps in our personalities, we have this tendency to be more self-centered. And some people have more tendency to that than others, of course. And then there's another aspect to it, of course, is there's a whole area of compulsion. People can be very compulsive helpers, and they think that this is a virtue, of course, because they're always helping other people, but it may actually be really an avoidance.
Which
Just
brings
an
us-
avoidance of themselves, or what would it be?
Avoidance of the reality of who they are.
Yes. Which brings us to a paradigm that we use here to help people know who they are, and it is the Enneagram. And we find that this a model of self-understanding and spiritual growth is a very, very helpful means. And through it, we do come to see what our blind spot is. We do come to see what our compulsion is. And we find out what our giftedness is, and that we all share in the faces of the divine. And so we've known people that who have found out where they are on this particular model of self-help, and they've been able to change their lives because it's been shown, the light has been shown to them.
Yeah. I have a little bit of familiarity with that, and at first I thought, well, it didn't always fit, and so then I was thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't mess with it. But then I can realize now that it's a really perfect tool of contemplation, because you discover certain traits or patterns, and whether they're yours or not, they're on the table there, and you're looking at it, see, and it's kind of like you're contemplating, is that what I'm doing, or am I doing it more, or am I doing it less, or...
And also, too, it's handy to be able to understand other people as well. And in fact, like, we're not alone, we live with other people. And to understand that other person really is living out of their compulsion just as I am too. So it helps them to break down oftentimes animosity.
All right. So then you could say, well, where did all these compulsions come from, and why is there only 8? Is there 9 or 8? How many are there?
9. It's just
9, huh? So then why is there only 9? And then you say, well, my God, I guess it's not really us. It's just something that's in the collective. And so then you can depersonalize it, and then that's perfect, because not only will you not have guilt, but you'll not have blame when you notice these patterns.
Yes, and I think you become much more compassionate towards the other person. Because you begin to realize, well, this is not just perversity on their part.
Yeah.
They're
not doing it on purpose.
Not doing it on purpose. They're not just being difficult for difficulty's sake, but rather they're just living out their own compulsions, which comes really from their childhood. So then I think that helps again to build community.
That's some of the foundation tools, isn't it? Because, I mean, you have to get over blame and guilt to build community.
Yes, exactly. Yes, but also too to recognise the gifts of the other person as well.
I haven't mentioned the word healing, because healing is a very and where do we find healing in this?
So is there direct healing? Is healing kind of like somebody comes? Okay, you have prayer circles and things, and that's a kind of a healing. But I mean, is there direct healing where you're actually focusing on somebody's healing, or is it just kind of like the sucor of the community?
The healing,
like
I think, is when a person comes and experiences acceptance as they are, that brings about healing. Now, we've seen that with people who you would have met at the table the other night, there's been a dramatic change in a lot of people, and it's come through acceptance of each other. And there have been people who have been very brittle, and they get very touchy, but as they see that you don't give up on them,
Yeah,
and
well, even accepting that touchiness, right, and that brittleness,
Mm.
right?
yeah,
And somehow there's a transition, because at first we accept them and they think, oh, well, are they really for real, or are they just kidding me? And then somehow they've got to come down and start accepting themselves, right? That's where the healing is. Is that correct?
yes, that's right. Well, yes, we accept them and then they accept themselves. Yes, that's very good. Yes. And
Is there any way to kind of hurry that along, or say, like, like you really can't accept yourself because you are a lover? Or can you convince them somehow that they're totally worthy of their own esteem?
well, I do think when people show their shadow side, which you do in community because people do rub you up, when they show their shadow side and they are accepted by the people in the group, that hurries it up.
Mm-hmm.
Because they mightn't have experienced that before. Because there'd be a lot of people who would just turn their backs on them. But also that if it's possible for somehow gently to point out some things sometimes. If, we do have retreats here too, and probably that when people enter into a 6-day retreat, or they do some of these workshops that we have, given by Buddhists and Hindu, Sufis, or whatever.
So is the point of the retreat kind of to know yourself through stillness? Because you have meditation every day, right?
Yes.
I think also that one doesn't change just by being told that one is whatever one is.
One's good.
One's good or bad. Like
Yeah.
we don't change, I think. I think it's a process. I think process is very important. And I think in the past sometimes we thought just by telling people who they were or what it was all about, that somehow they would change.
Yeah, and then when they didn't change, we just say, "Oh, you weren't ready."
You weren't ready. Or
Yeah,
something
right. We
wrong.
got a
Yes,
good
that's
excuse for
right,
that.
yes. Because I think people stayed in their heads mainly, and it really didn't get into their feeling area. And I know Carl Jung made a comment once that there is no change without feeling. So in other words, we have to be able to process and to be able to accept our feelings, accept whatever may be happening to us, and learn to be with that. And so I think process is very important as a part of the ongoing healing in our lives. So it means really to put yourself in the position of change.
Right. So patience is very important.
Patience is very important, yes. We use the very lovely little comment from Lao Tzu. Do you have the patience to wait until your mud settles and the water becomes clear? Can you remain unmoving until the right action arises by itself? It's the famous Wu Wei. So patience is the first issue, I think, in all of this. So you're not going to learn to play golf if you're not patient, I don't think.
Right.
I often say to people, if you want to learn to play golf, learn to hit the ball.
Yeah.
quietly.
Are you willing to let the water clear by itself? That must be my way, because I mean, I got fed up and kind of pushing out and trying to do things and trying to force myself to. I was kind of a real forcer in business, and as a young man, I kind of felt like I was deficient in so many ways that I had to just really force everything, and it didn't work very much. So that now in the spiritual search, I've always, or for some time, I've kind of backed off of any practices and just waiting have patience for the water to clear by itself.
Well, in this sort of technique, I think, to do that, which means awareness, I think, learning to become more aware of yourself. Because you could just be saying, oh, I'm not doing anything exceptional, but I'm not doing anything, and there's no change taking place. So you do have to, I think, have some techniques like awareness is a very important one. The Buddhists are very good on this, I think.
Yeah. Well, for some reason, my awareness is just coming, but I guess it's because I'm doing these talks.
Yes, well, that's a developmental process, really, to become more aware. And even just doing simple things like working in the kitchen.
Right.
And just being focused on what you're doing. Not having the radio going, or if you're ironing the clothes, not having the radio on, or thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow, but rather focusing on what you're doing. And that creates a very strong awareness. So then you begin to recognize what you're actually doing You
Yeah.
see yourself doing things, whereas before you didn't see them at all.
It's a problem, people with too strong of goals, and they're always seeing every activity as some kind of a process to get to their goal. And so this is not important. I just got to get this out of the way. And then when I get to the goal, that's going to be important. And so then in that way, they're always tripping over what's happening today, saying, no, this is not important. I have to. Do they have a too strong of a goal or what?
Some personality types are like that, I think.
So just to be in the moment is of great importance to, I suppose, most of us. It's a very big challenge. Just to be able to be in the moment. And as you were talking, Richard, you were talking about through what you're doing, the work you're doing now in the interviews, so you would be listening very intently to what another is saying. Now that is that's the dialogue. Listening is a very important part of meditation.
That's the awareness,
So
right?
the awareness, and so you would be building up more awareness of either characters you have or you don't have as you're listening to other people. So I would think it would precipitate a little change in you.
A big change. Because I guess I just gave up on trying to have a script, or trying to remember anything. So then I thought I better just listen.
Yes.
But also I think, Richard, what's important too is listen to yourself during the interview. Because you listen to what is your reaction to what I'm saying or Kathleen is saying. It's like, I think when you're doing counselling, you need to listen to yourself because you're a part of the experience, not just the other person. So as you in a way, you almost got to listen to half yourself and half the other person. So what is my reaction when the person says these things to me? Do I just nod and say, oh, yes, or no?
No,
or
this
there's
is
a reaction.
no,
going
really,
on.
this is brilliant. It's coming through like a brand new idea to me. It's just a brilliant idea to be separate from the dialogue and listening to both parties speak, in a way, to back off one half a step and listen to the whole dialogue that's happening.
But that takes you up into your head, you see.
Well, in a way, but I mean,
But if it takes you down into your own experience, like what is my reaction to what's being said, that helps you to become more aware of yourself and allow then change to take place. Because if you would just stay in your head and say, oh, it's a good idea, oh, yes, that's a great idea, it doesn't impinge on you.
so then this is Jung, because he said you need without feeling.
Yes.
So you have to be in your own feeling of
Yes.
what you're receiving.
Yes, and recognise what my feelings are all about. And so then I won't project those out onto other people. So I think that's part of the process of the healing process, is that if you're like a spiritual director like myself, I have to be very aware that, well, I'm also in need of healing too, not just the other person.
Yeah.
And this dialogical process that's going on here now really is a part of my healing too.
Right, so then we're all in flux. Nobody's arrived. We're not a teacher. We're not a healer. And we're just in a process of healing.
Yes. We're in a process of dialogue, of being a human person, one to the other. It's in the dialogue together. And in fact, that's where the healing takes place, I think.
And also, part of our community, while we look at silence as the spirit of silence is important, it's not the only way that people come to healing. It is through, in fact, entering into dialogue with those who come to our community, and how we are changing and they are changing, because often people, they come and they've got needs, and if they just enter, we just say, you do your own thing, you just go, just be silent, probably nothing will happen. And in fact, they could build up a whole lot of negative energy in that silence. So people need to be able to say how they are feeling, what they're thinking, and have someone to listen to them. One of the things that we have done in our meditations for years now is to check out how people are feeling when they first come, which is not something that is done in a lot of traditions. In fact, we probably are the only ones we know who do it. But at the end of the day, we also check out their feelings and see what has been changed, what has been transformed from in the morning when they come to the afternoon. So you could check out yourself, how have you changed since you first stepped in our door to this time now? You may have changed. I have changed from my first, when I met you at the door, because I have become, I suppose, something more aware of difference. That's one thing, actually, in the living out of our lives, doesn't it? And I suppose this is our, where the sacred happens here, is our daily life.
Well, for sure, it has to be in our daily life. You know, with me, you asked me how I feel and how I was before and after, and I don't know. I mean, this Australia has hit me so hard. It seems like everything is different, and exactly where I fit in there, and where I claim it's the garden or the beautiful people or the amazing towns and really idyllic locations. I mean, they're like movie sets to me. All your rural places are so amazing, and the open-heartedness of people is so amazing that I'm just kind of, I'm not so sure where to find myself in there, right? I mean, it's all so new and so wonderful, and it's so heart-opening. You know, I feel like I'm just open to it and want to be there, and you know, I feel I'm received, which is what you said in the beginning. The community listens, and without judgment. And maybe I'm being judged, but I mean, I'm so different that they don't have any categories.
Well, see, yes, you're in a different place to what your normal is, and that you can, in fact, your awareness is more heightened, probably, being in a different location, different kind of country, people with different agendas to maybe those that you normally are working with.
There's nothing boring. There's nothing like mundane. There's nothing that's just to be gotten by to get to the next step, right? Everything is an adventure. And it's a beautiful way to live, and it's a beautiful place to run that experiment.
So the Spirit was leading you in this venture out to this country, the great land of the South.
It totally hit me in 1,000 ways, so that's a good way to say it, you know. Like, I mean, Spirit was right on. I could say, darn it, Spirit, why didn't you take me out here 10 years ago?
Oh, but you weren't ready 10 years ago.
Oh, that's what they all say. What an excuse.
Oh, it all happens when we're ready.
Yeah, right.
But I think also I've had experiences like that, Richard, when I've been in the United States, for instance. Hospitality, welcome, friendliness of people. So it's, I just wonder whether it's when we leave our own environment that we somehow, as Kathleen suggested, we become a bit freer, I think. We're moving away from the everyday that we've been so used to, and all of a sudden life is a bit different. When we notice things, like I noticed, for instance, I was doing my sabbatical at Rhode Island, and I noticed how courteous were the bus drivers. Now, whether I just found a very courteous bus driver or two, I don't really know, but they're extremely courteous. And I always found the courtesy of the Americans, very courteous people, while they spoke to me, which I wouldn't find here in Australia, I don't think.
Yeah, somehow if something's different,
Something
it hits both sides, you know. It hits
Yes, that's
not
right.
only us, but it's the other people say, oh, this guy's got an accent. I wonder if that's Australian or Canadian.
Yes, that's right. Yes, but and I've had many experiences around the world in many countries. Really, I think generality people are welcoming, and I think that people are open and compassionate generally.
You know, I was thinking this, that it's not only that people are compassionate, but somehow we, through our growth, we're able to accept compassion and accept hospitality. Because for a long time in our lives, maybe we think, oh no, we don't need their hospitality. You know, we're pride or arrogant or proud or somehow not able to. We're not able to accept love, right?
Yes, exactly. Scared. We can't let the other person into our experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I feel a great opening on that too, that I feel like I'm willing to accept all these things, and maybe that's the key to it right there.
Like reciprocation. We reciprocate, whereas it might have been more one-sided before. But yes, I think going to a different place where we don't have our usual agendas, and we don't have people who are saying, "Oh, there he goes again." Because they don't know anything about us. So we're a much freer situation where we can be probably more like ourselves. Because we think it's other people's expectations of us that bind us at times. But we have to grow beyond that, of course. But that's what stops us. Well, it does for me. When I go to a group of Dominican sisters, I think, oh, well, yes, well, that one thinks that and she thinks that. So you can be limited by what you think other people think. But if you don't know, you're free.
Yeah. In a way, I feel like I took advantage, because I was taking a great weight off my head when I got here, because I had such a backload of work and I was just kind of processing so many things, and I was freeing myself in another way, right? In other words, I can go on these trips and collect these videos and so on, but when I get 30 or 20 or 30 of them, I feel really clogged up. And somehow if I can make them happen, then I can just be more carefree and more... And of course, then I just go out and collect another 20 or 30, so it's a kind of a weird situation.
Yes, oh well, maybe it is just not to burden yourself too much, not to do too many interviews. I mean, you don't have to do them all.
Of course I don't have to.
And would make you lighten your load a bit.
Right. Well, here was 5 days. I only did 2. This
well,
one and one last
and what
night.
kind of a what kind of a week was it?
It was, like I say, fabulous for me. I mean, I was even feeling kind of like clogged up, physically, and I'm much more free now. Everything is just freed up. Whether how that symbology or metaphor works, I don't know. But just like you said, I mean, you come into a community of acceptance, and then there's a healing. And whether that's a physical healing or whether it's a psychological healing or an emotional healing, it's all of the above, right?
But I think it is too. It might just teach the lesson that I mustn't overload myself. It's all good, but you don't have to do it all.
Yeah, American man, young. Young. Yeah, believe it, I'm young.
Yes, I can do it.
He's gonna go for it,
I can do it.
Right.
Yes, that's right.
I don't know, but anyhow.
So I think freedom is the word. That's been a big word for me, I must admit, in my life. It's been freedom. And learning to be free myself, and helping others to be free. And I think Jesus was very free.
Yeah.
Because he knew what was ahead of him.
Right.
He understood that, I'm sure. Although it was difficult, to have to accept that. We know he wept over Jerusalem because he came to bring peace, to bring a sense of identity to the people. They didn't want it. So he suffered on that level, I think. Some of his friends just walked away from him. So he suffered on that level. And also he suffered his death. He died because of his conviction that he was there to bring peace and to bring a sense of wholeness into people's lives. So he paid the great price for that.
Mm. One thing I guess you could say is, what is freedom? I mean, it's the biggest freedom must be freedom from your own thoughts and from your own emotions, because that's the ones that are always buggering us.
You know, I think freedom is about to do what makes us who we should be, in a sense, to make us a loving and caring person.
You mean freedom is action-based, or?
Well, freedom is not about doing what I like, for instance. You know, I can do what I like. You know. That's not freedom, really. That's compulsion.
Well, freedom is liking what you do, not doing what you like.
It's freedom to be able to be what will make me a loving, caring person.
Isn't that an ongoing discovery also? Because we think we know what love is, but then tomorrow we know it in a deeper way, and then the next day we know it even in a deeper way. And then at first we try to put it on like a set of clothes and saying, well, this is a loving person. And then we find that we make a few glitches, you know, and we kind of mistreat somebody and say, well, was that loving or what?
No, it's very unloving perhaps, but
yeah.
So it's an ongoing process. It's a journey, really.
Yeah. So and somehow opening up to that journey is so that we can learn from it, you know, and not saying, no, we can't be in that, we can't be doing that because, well, we already know it is the first thing we say, or otherwise we make too many errors, or those guys should go first, right? They should love us more because we've already loved them and it didn't do any good.
One of my confreres used to say, that's the reason why we have rubbers on pencils.
Right.
Which I think is a very, very good way of putting it, in other words. We do make mistakes, and life is about making mistakes and allowing one another to make mistakes. And so Jesus would say it's about forgiveness.
Yeah, that's all in that paradigm of making mistakes, forgiving, and forgiving yourself and moving ahead.
Forgiving others and moving ahead.
And I've always thought that just on even sports, you know, that I never wanted to climb up like a spider on a wall or something like that, where one mistake is the last one, you know. And I thought I always want to put myself in a place where you could learn by your mistakes.
So I think all good education is helping people to learn to make mistakes. And if you make a mistake, well, that's all right. Let's go on to the next phase, whatever it might be. But not to enter into blame or into putting the person down or whatever. Often our education system in the past was based on that, was putting that person down.
Yeah, I know. I think I discovered that in Italy, that maybe they learn by embarrassment, to avoid embarrassment, because they would study English for years, 5, 6, 7 years, just all in school, but nobody would actually come out and say anything. Because I think they were afraid that they were going to mispronounce or put a couple of silly words together, and somebody would laugh and say, "Oh, you read the books, but what do you get?"
But above all, I think just Jesus said, "I've come that you have life and have it to the full." And it's that fullness of life. We're not called just to bear things. We're called to enjoy and live and laugh and love. That's what it's about.
It's interesting. In the Old Testament, it's interesting that the paradigm of what heaven might be like was a banquet, a banquet of fine wines. So it's like Christian life is not about being sad or being introspective. It's rather living the life, being alive. And all the things we've been talking about, it's all about that, basically.
Well, you live pretty good here. This is such a beautiful place, But let me ask you this, because how do you put it together? That like the Carmelites have a vow of poverty, right? And how do you figure out where's the line of what is poverty and what is just parsimonious and what is really? I mean, because really we're talking about God's abundance in a way. And so then, what does that mean, poverty?
Well, I think poverty has lots of levels, I think. The first level, I think, is to be like Jesus. He didn't have any much. He was wandering around, teaching and preaching. He said, I haven't got anywhere to lay down my head, he said. So it's about something like that. It's rather complicated, of course, a complex concept. It's also, I think, poverty is also about that for myself, I don't have everything for myself. I am not the total person. I lack. I have needs. In other words, I have needs to be loved. I need to love. Poverty is about that, I think. It's also a sense of being in solidarity with the poor, those who are really poor. So having that sense of solidarity, being able to stand with, being concerned about. So the group that I belong to, we're very involved in justice and peace issues. And for instance, in the Philippines, we have one of our formation houses actually in one of the barrios. The young men have to go and live there for a year. Now, they will come, who knows where they've come from, but they have to go and live in the barrio, which is a very poor area. They have to learn to have that solidarity, that sense of belonging, of being a part of the poor.
And so, I'd like to come in with, I'm a Dominican, and so we have to be able to receive. That's part of poverty.
So then the brothers in the Middle Ages were able to be like Jesus, and because that somehow they were, whatever they received was enough to sustain life. Anyhow, maybe it wasn't. Maybe they were cold and so on. And maybe spiritual teachers in a way live like Jesus because they don't maybe have money, or they're gaining money, or they're giving retreats and people are paying. You know, whether it's an agreed upon payment or a donation. In a way, it's similar.
Like what you're doing.
But I think also too that it's not about not using money. I think that's a bit of a trap for some people to think, oh, I have a vow of poverty, therefore I can't spend money, because that can become a situation of attachment to money, really.
Yeah, that's what I was really asking.
Yes,
how do you distill that down into a lifestyle?
Well, that's always difficult. I think poverty is one of the most difficult vows, perhaps, in our contemporary society, particularly in the West, because oftentimes we would be in a better position now than we were when we were young. I grew up in a very working class family. My mother was a single parent. My father was killed when I was only 18 months old. So she was a widow at 24. So I grew up in a very poor family. So when I went to become a Carmelite, I went to live in a big house, a 3-story house. And I had 3 meals a day. And I was well looked after, well cared for, had community to live with, beautiful grounds around our monastery. Yeah. So in a sense, sociologically, I went up. I left the West and I went into the East.
Poverty was a better deal, right?
I lived in the eastern part.
I lived in Italy, and I had a second-class jobs. I was always looking for bettering my jobs and stuff, but I wasn't really top on the language, and I didn't have a kind of an in. And in a way, Italy has so many social guarantees that it's hard to get hired. In other words, instead of hired, they'll give you a test as a kind of an outside consultant on some kind of a temporary basis. And so then I just tried to balance my income and outgo, my expenses. But somehow that stuck over when I came back here and started working. I still kind of had this idea of a poverty, that and it was coloring my life in a way that maybe didn't have to.
Thanksgiving is to me the essence of living a happy life. Is being grateful for what you have. Amen.
Amen.
So poverty is a very complex concept, of course.
It's very complex.
As all these vows are, really, they're complex, and they have many multi-leveled. And a part, I suppose, of our spirituality is to depth what it means. So, what does it really mean to be poor? I had a very interesting experience. A Franciscan, he was a friar like myself, follower of St. Francis, and he was the confessor to the monastery where I was a student. He used to come every week to hear our confession. Lovely man, but he was suffering from multiple sclerosis. And eventually the outcome for him was that he was in a nursing home and he couldn't move about at all, really. So he sent off a message to one of his confreres, would he mind coming along? He said, would you mind coming and telling me how to be as poor as St. Francis was? Now, the husband couldn't even feed himself. Yet somehow he had this great urge to depth this experience of poverty. Yet he was one of the most poorest people in the world. So there was what we might say, a transcendent experience of going out beyond oneself to higher value. So poverty is like any, I suppose, value, has great depth, depending on who you are, where you are, and so on. So for him, in a most difficult situation of poverty, he was still seeking to be poorer.
Wow. So in the face of that poverty, like I see here, one of the ultimate riches, and that's taking teaching and putting the light of today in it, and
Yes.
making it alive for the people that come and go here, and that's such a rich contribution that it should be celebrated, and that's what we're doing right now, is celebrating it.
Yes.
One of the aspects too of poverty is mutuality, and which is really giving and receiving. And Father Ken and myself, hopefully we work in a certain mutuality, not that with a man and a woman working together. Not Ken is not higher than I am. We are working in a certain equality based on mutuality. And which I suppose when we look at all the different religions of the world, we're not putting one religion ahead of another, because every religion has truth. And we hopefully are, through our meditation, distilling that truth in order that we might be free and we might live life to the full.
I truly thank you for that, because I think, like many Christians, many people might think Christians don't see every truth in every religion and every faith. And here we are. Here's some beautiful group that is espousing mutuality. And so...
Just a comment on talking about Christians. It's like talking about Muslims. The Muslims are not Muslims. They're different groups of Muslims, different groups of Christians.
Actually, they're all individuals, right? And then somehow a label got on them.
Yes, but what I mean is, like, there are groups. So there are Christian groups, and it's very easy to paint everyone else by what you hear from somewhere else. But that's the point I'm making, basically. And I was at a conference recently, not recently, a few years ago now. It was a dialogue with Islam and the West. And it was interesting to hear some of the people from Islam saying, oh, you Christians. And I still kick myself, not putting up my hand and saying, excuse me.
Ken would like to say, I'm a Catholic Christian, which is a different, we're not a fundamentalist. We don't belong to a fundamentalist group. We belong to members of the Catholic Church, universal Christian.
But I think it's also just that, I suppose that's my point, is that we can so easily put labels on whoever they are, like whether it's Christians, Muslims, whether it's Hindus, Buddhists, or whatever. And then we see one group and we say, well, I don't like that group very much. And they say, I don't like that group. But what I'm really saying is I don't particularly like that little group. And,
or that person.
Or that person, yeah. So I think it's we have to be a bit more precise, I think, in our language, so that we don't just keep, again, painting people
But too broad of a brush.
Yes, but rather allowing a group to be what it is. And there are lots of areas where I would disagree with lots of Christians. And I agree with a lot of what Buddhists are saying. There are also a lot of things I wouldn't agree about Buddhists either. And Islam might be the same, I think. So it's one of those, I suppose, we have a great tendency to want to objectify all the time. So it's important, I think, just in our thinking, just to be clear on that area. That's what I want to say about that.
Thank you so much, Ken, for this time to get to know you. And of course, thank you so much for this week that I've spent with you. So,
thank you, Richard. I enjoyed it and fascinated by what you're doing.
And thank you, Kathleen. Thank you so much for being visible to our audience and telling us the things that are important to you and what's meaningful in life.
Thank you, Richard, and may you journey from here with great peace and love in your heart.
Thank you, Kathleen. And thank you all you guys out there in wonderful land for coming in onto our veranda here and just seeing what a marvel we have in Australia and maybe in the world next to you too. Just go out and look for it. So goodbye for this time.